and welcome to And It's Live, the history of the Premier League. We are in part 2 of season 96-97, still in that long golden summer of 1996. Joined, as always, by my two good friends. Adam Thornton, how are you today?
Very good, thank you. Yeah, we were just talking off air about how you remember things differently to how they happened. I think this is going to be another example of it. So looking forward to getting stuck into it.
Absolutely is. David Edgar's here as well. David, how are you?
I'm good, thank you, guys. Yeah, lovely to be here. And absolutely, I mean, already the revelations of things that I have misremembered have been quite shocking to me. And it's wonderful to go back and actually realise that your mind does play tricks on you. That there's so many things that are part of, I think, collective received wisdom that we all seem to fall into by osmosis, particularly in football.
Yeah, my memories up front are that United strolled to this title very comfortably. Arsenal kind of picked up in preparation of next season. I'd forgotten it was very much in the mix until quite late, but we'll get into all that. This week's show will be bookended by two games between Newcastle and Manchester United, and the first one obviously being the Charity Shield, David, in August, of course, and the Sunday of the weekend where Oasis were at Nebworth, and probably the apotheosis, the peak, the absolute biggest point anyway of Britpop, and the hangover and that slow downturn was just about to come and seep into 1997. But this weekend, you are at the top of the mountain of that particular genre.
Absolutely. Being, super cool and an early adopter, I had stopped liking Oasis by this point because I had seen them in the Cat House in Glasgow in front of a couple of hundred people, and then 5 times in 1994. So as soon as they started playing Loch Lomond and things, and it's been so much fun the past year when people have been gatekeeping and saying to young kids, "Were you at Loch Lomond?" I'm like, "Yeah, come on." The real cool people had stopped going by then. But it was absolutely, at its peak at this point. You felt unstoppable if you were a teenager. I mean, you really did, and it's something that I hope that the younger people can get back again, because you felt part of something, and music almost reflected football. I don't know, because you felt, if you were into the indie music or a band, then you wore it. You literally did. You wore it like a football shirt, and it did seem that the charts were absolutely full of guitar bands, indie music. Some of it not very good, I have to say, with all due respect to Northern Uproar, etc. But if you had a bowl cut and 4 guitars, there was a fairly good chance you were getting a record deal. In terms of football, I think because all these years later that City have come to so much reflect Oasis, Chelsea for Blur, for example, as well, another strong identification, that there's this sense that Manchester United were sort of apart from it, Britpop, because they were, they've recently just released a Stone Roses inspired kit to commemorate the death of Manny, and Manchester was a few years before. But United were really cool at this point. People forget that. United was super cool at this point. They had, Beckham and Giggs, and they were very glam indeed at this point. And they had a sort of, you really felt they had taken Liverpool's position as only slightly disputed best team at the moment. You'd get a challenge here and there, but generally speaking, I think the biggest compliment you can say, or the biggest invocation of their status, was whoever finishes above them will win the title.
Which is what Alan Shearer would say at the end of the show, and we'll pick that up later. Adam, very briefly on the game itself, Manchester United cruise, and I mean cruise to victory, 4-0 at Wembley. Shearer talks about just being absolutely embarrassed and obviously not good enough, blah, blah, blah. This is a big moment for him, of course, the first feature in his hometown shirt. 2 up at half-time, 4-0 in the end. All 4 goals are are actually very, very enjoyable goals. The second and third, I just want to point out, Cantona just backheels the ball, almost not looking, into Beckham's path, who fizzes one. I mean, this incredible direct cross onto the head of Nicky Butt and a diving header, which looks brilliant anyway. That's sensational. Beckham run through and go, and he lobs the Newcastle goalkeeper as well for the third. It really is just picking up where they left off a wee bit, and Newcastle and Keegan have an issue with this team.
Totally do. Just on Beckham, I know it's a bit of a cliche to say it was a really good crosser of the ball, but I think it's one of those ones that we speak about a lot, where you can say it a lot and probably still be underrated, because it's just incredible the variation that he had on them. This that you mentioned, whipped ones in, longer arching ones. He was sensational at it, and I think not your sort of average winger. He is more of that sort of wide midfielder, I would suggest, who can cross. So again, you're starting to see this divergence from, you stand in this area of the pitch, you should do X. So I think this is a good tent pole for that, if you like, as well. But yeah, I think the game overall, it looks relatively as you would expect, I guess, and maybe it sort of signifies, maybe that's why in your heads you thought this was
United
a
monstered them, yeah,
because this game is the set off, and it's your initial set for the season.
Can I just dive in on that point, Adam?
Yeah, sure.
My recollections, Martin, I'd be really interested to hear your take on this. My recollections are United duffed them up in the Charity Shield. Newcastle then gubbed them famously later in the season, and that's like a watershed for United. And then I just thought that they battered through. Martin, is that far from your opinion?
Kind of, and we will get to this notion that Ferguson, now prioritising Europe, the league will take care of the league in the winter. Be in the mix, and we'll be all right. Plenty to come. We did last season a kind of famous match of the day talking point, I suppose, with Alan Hansen. This match of the day, my word, was packed full. You could do a whole show on this Saturday. In fact, back deep in the Nest and Dorma archives, you can find exactly that. We very conscious of time for this episode, so we'll try our best. But this is quite the opening day of Barclays action, gentlemen. Davey, I'll start with you. Riverside Stadium, Middlesbrough, newly promoted Middlesbrough with, in fact, not newly promoted at all, but they've been promoted recently. The upcoming team against Liverpool, who, showing signs of resurgence in a quite bogging Cream away.
Yes,
it should be said. Ravanelli, Emerson, etc. All on display in quite an incredible 3-3. Ravanelli hat-trick, Fowler's there, Barnes is there, it's all go, and well, this is it, isn't it? This is what Sky, this is what everybody's after, this kind of entertainment every weekend.
In terms of, as I say, that received wisdom, I was convinced Middlesbrough had just been promoted, and they hadn't. You're absolutely right. I thought Middlesbrough were straight up and they made these signings. Nope, not at all. Look, this game, you could write a book on it, couldn't you? I mean, it was back and forth. It was non-stop, two teams going at, and it seemed very indicative of the culture at the time, which was attack, attack, attack. Look at who we're buying. Look at the players that are coming in. In terms of preset narratives that you have in your head, Ravanelli's going to take this league by storm. That I just believed, because look at him. And then he gets a hat-trick in his opening day against Liverpool. But then Liverpool, again, this is maybe why they won't win the league. They're involved in that was my take on the opening day, because, look, brilliant performance by Middlesbrough. Liverpool stood up to it, but they didn't win. They conceded 3. They are flaky at the back. They don't have the same level at the back that they have up front. We know they've got super attacking players. We know that they are, a team that are capable of scoring lots of goals. again, it's funny because everybody talks about the cream suits and nobody talks about the cream strips. You would have thought that would have been a tactical mistake. I think it was Reebok, wasn't it? Was it a Reebok kit?
Yeah, that's Bolton. You know what I mean? That's not Liverpool. That's not.
I do strongly identify Bolton with Reebok, the stadium.
Just a note on the cosmopolitan nature of this opening weekend. The first weekend of the Premier League, this might be out on a couple of numbers, but bear with me. In terms of players born outside the UK and Ireland, on the opening weekend of the Premier League 92, there were 10 players in all of those matches. On this opening weekend, which obviously 4 years later, there are 34. 4 years later in 2000, anyone want to guess on how many players started that particular weekend's fixtures that were not born on these shores?
Is it in three figures?
120?
No, it's not as big. 75. So it's clearly moving in step. Chelsea have a huge part, and Arsenal did a huge part to play in that as we get on. But it was a clear part of that opening weekend. This is glamour. Sky, for the first time around the start of this season, I think they've always blown their own trumpet about the Premier League. That's what they do. But I think this is Richard Keys for the first time saying this is the best league in the world. Now, it is nowhere near the best league in the world, but market it and it will come. You can create something into existence, and that's ultimately what they did. But again, post that Euro 96 glow and all of these players from Serie A, champions of Europe, and all of that coming here to play for Middlesbrough and Chelsea, respectively, then, there is that sense of we're going somewhere. Adam, can we go to Selhurst Park? And United very much picking up where they left off. Cantona picking up where he left off, just driving a shot low into the goal. Dennis Irwin added another very comfortable day for Manchester United at Selhurst Park and playing the ball out of defence with a few minutes to go. In fact, I think we might be in injury time. And David Beckham decides Neil Sullivan's a bit off his line. I'm going to have a crack at this just before the ball reaches the halfway line. So technically in the United half. And this was, for all the stuff that we'll touch on this opening day, this is the story of it. Someone has arrived.
For sure. Yeah, I think this is one of my early core memories of the Premier League. For that to happen, I think what was the first time I had seen it. I'm sure there will be earlier ones that you remember. Certainly the first time I've seen it, we speak about how everywhere the Premier League was, and you're seeing it in multiple different iterations across news, match of the day, everything. It was one of the first viral moments, I think, if there was even a thing like viral moments at that point. The audacity of it, I think, is incredible. Yes, it's 2-0 up. Yes, it's against Wimbledon, but it's just incredible. I think it's one of those moments that, like you said, someone has arrived, and I think it sums up David's point. Man United are cool at this point, and they're in vogue, and it now looks like they're absolutely unstoppable because they've got this batch of young kids coming through, and they're supplementing with really sensible signings, and they're looking like they are going to go and steamroll the league as far as I'm concerned. And when something like that happens as well, it's a bit of a cherry on the cake. So everything looked like it was coming up United at the end of that game for sure.
A couple of things, Adam, before we move on. The context to that goal and me being wow about it was that I'd grown up with my dad saying Pelé nearly scored from the halfway line.
Yeah.
Can you imagine someone even trying that? And he was so close, but being close enough was good enough to be, this is the greatest player in the world, to even try something from that at a World Cup. So for someone to do that, not a great week for Neil Sullivan because he was done off his line when Newcastle played them in the midweek.
Right,
The second thing, this isn't for this week's show, but just to plant a seed, because I want to ask you later on. Beckham will be Young Player of the Year, and he'll play quite a lot of it in the middle. He plays both games against Liverpool in the middle of the park, both Arsenal games, I think, in the middle of the park. Hasn't quite moved out. Now, a lot of that's just necessity, Keenan, but not always fit and available. He hasn't quite moved out, isn't yet wearing number 7 either, number 10 at this season. And I'd be interested in your thoughts on him as a central midfielder and whether there was an opportunity maybe missed there for the future of his career. But yeah, I think you maybe mentioned why it was just a necessity to move him out there because the strength of his crossing was just absolutely exceptional. Another hat-trick hero is at Nottingham Forest, David. Kevin Campbell still kicking a ball, still referenced in this show. Nottingham Forest with a very good season, good couple of seasons, actually. And he's continuing. It's not going to end like that, I'm afraid. But a very convincing, dominant British centre forward performance in their 3-0 win at Coventry.
As a Rangers supporting person with a fondness for Everton, Walter Smith and Kevin Campbell are two of my all-time favourite people. I loved Kevin Campbell, Martin. It will not surprise you knowing the type of centre forward that I am fond of, which is a big battering ram type who can play, who can score goals, but who can single-handedly go out there and absolutely ragdoll a back four. And these were some tough back fours back then, and they generally were back fours. You got the odd 3 at the back, which I hate mentioning because I know it brings Adam out in hives if you mention 3-5-2 to him. But Kevin Campbell was a terrific striker who really, in my opinion, didn't get his due until he goes to Everton. And do you remember the year, Martin, we'll cover it on here, where he pretty much single-handedly keeps him up when he arrives late in the season on loan. And, I mean, just as magnificent. He was a proper footballer, sadly no longer with us, died tragically young. And he was a wonderful, wonderful football player because, yes, he was your traditional British centre forward. He was good in the air, and there's nothing wrong with that. Yes, he was physical. You had to be. You either had to be exceptionally skillful or you had to be physical. You had to be able to cope and go up and have a battle against centre-backs, which he could do. He was quick. People don't, I think, quite get that because he was very, very quick over that like 3-4 yards, that burst. And he was one of the best I've seen actually at getting to the front post, which is an art. It's a skill to regularly be there first ahead of your defender. He was so good at that, at making that near post run and getting on the end of things, whether it be for a finish or a flick to the back post. And he always struck me, Martin, as the type of player that another forward in a 4-4-2 or a 3-5-2 would adore playing next to. Don Hutchison speaks about it. He would play off him quite a lot and said it was absolutely brilliant because when he saw the centre-back with the ball, he said, I just got moving because 8 times out of 10 he's going to get the flick on and he's going to put it where I need it to be. Terrific player and a real sad loss that Kevin Campbell, because he was only 54 when he passed, and it was a real shame. But we'll come to it. He's one of the reasons that Everton have this unbroken Premier League history because they were very close to going down that year. But at Forest, started really well. And then just sort of that whole side will lose its way over this season.
Yeah, unsustainable. Should give props to Sheffield Wednesday. They beat Aston Villa on the opening day and won their first 3 games. Go to Newcastle indeed and win. The only team to win those first 3 games. And Richie Humphries, my goodness, with an absolute blaster. That ball. I'm sure Sky recorded it because they were very much into their gizmos now as being the hardest shot ever taken. It might be in the 90s or something like that. I mean, it is blasted into the net. So props to Richie Humphries. Adam,
if you're listening, Richie.
I'm sure he is. Adam, I'll come to you in a minute about Newcastle's start because it's a disappointing one. Quickly, David, Spurs go to Blackburn and they win. But Gary Mabbutt, bless him, is it innocuous? It's not an innocuous tackle. It's a bad tackle. I'm not entirely sure it's the worst. It's one of those where he's following through in the art of humping the ball up the pitch. But he tries to launch one, and the Blackburn player comes through. The legs kind of raised. He breaks his legs. I think his leg absolutely shatters. Out for the rest of the season. I think he comes back a little in 97, 98, but that's when he retires. He's a kind of unlucky Alf character, David. Really, a very gifted player. But there's just always, he's battling against something. Obviously, he struggled with diabetes all his life, but injury. Of course, he's fractured face at one point, cheekbone, I think, skull. He scores an OG in an FA Cup final that Spurs really should win and don't. There's really that kind of light and shade with Mabbutt. Always found it quite sad because he was a very good player. Brilliant guy by just about every account there's ever been, but this is very much the end of his playing career for all intents and purposes here on the first day.
Yeah, real shit. I mean, always horrible when you see somebody pick up a serious injury, but when it's somebody who's picked up serious injuries in the past, you really do feel for them. I think there's a lot of parallels, Martin, with Luke Shaw, with Gary Mabbutt. In terms of clearly a very gifted player at a big club for a number of seasons, maybe doesn't win as much as you might have, because people, that Spurs side he was a big part of in the late 80s was a very, very good side indeed, was very capable side, and could and probably should have won more than it did. Look, for him to have the career he had in those days of sports science, I think, given that he was diabetic, I think it's remarkable, and he deserves nothing but credit for that. I think that he almost had to self-manage his condition, Martin. He didn't, get a lot. Nowadays, it's different, but back then, there wasn't really anywhere near the amount of. In fact, there wasn't. I can definitively say that. The injury he got from that John Fashanu incident was awful and an absolute disgrace. The stuff that Fashanu was doing at that time, which I think these days, I'm not saying this lightly, I think if a player did that, they would face criminal charges because he's trying to hurt them and he succeeds.
And it's just a joke now, right? It's or looking back, that's just how it was. The crazy gang, blah blah blah.
Crazy guy, yeah. I hate that. It's one of the things I hate about Fashanu is that he was a thug and he did try to hurt people and he succeeded. And I really don't like that deification of that Wimbledon side, because to me there is a line, and it's quite a thick line. It's not, I think, one that's hard to spot between we are a physical side and we actively wish to take people and put them in hospital. And I think they cross that far too often. This one, though, you kind of knew with his age, his injury record, that would be it. And it is a real shame. And if you've heard him, be interviewed over the years, Martin, he's a very intelligent guy. He's a very clever guy. And I don't think that he deserved to go out in this way. Tottenham fans, though, they'll do very much, he's a club legend there. Deservedly so, because he was there a long time. But like I say, I see parallels, someone that Luke Shaw, that if they get a bad tackle, it's not that inch off where it's painful but not serious. It was always a serious one, and it was a huge blow for Tottenham because you're losing a guy who not only is a very good football player, but he's your on-pitch leader. He's the guy they look to in times of strife, and as you say, he has a brief comeback the following year, but it's never likely.
Until next time, thank you, boys. Thank you, listeners. Bye for now.